Hello, welcome to Next TMT Talks. I'm Daniel Frankel, co-founder of Next TMT. Real pleased to have with us one of the most innovative, creative forces in the video entertainment business. You know him, you love him, Dean Devlin, founder of or co-founder of Electric Entertainment, and Electric Now, the free ad-supported streaming service. And from the Librarian to Leverage to, I didn't know this till recently, My Bodyguard, a creative force, as I mentioned. Dean, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
For those of you who don't know Dean, he's done a lot of things, often first in the entertainment business. And one of his first endeavors was a role in the 1980,
Yep.
81
80.
film My Bodyguard, a youth drama starring Chris Makepeace as I believe, New Yorker who comes to the big city and gets bullied by a young Matt Dillon, I think.
Yes, Matt Dillon.
Right. Right. And, I, at 13-year-olds, kinda looked like Chris Makepeace. So the movie had the effect of me kinda getting bullied in junior high the following fall. So anyway, Dean, you're always easy to talk to and fun to talk to, and I always learn something. I last spoke to you 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, in 2021, you launched, Electric Now,
Uh,
your streaming platform, and now you're putting its first big scripted original, The Poly Couple, which started off as a TikTok short, and you've adapted it. What's going on? Tell us about the state of Electric Now and, its first big endeavor here in originals.
Next month we're dropping brand new versions of our app, and it's an improvement, and we're adding over 60 live channels, and we've added a lot of new content. But this year is our first time of producing original content exclusively for Electric Now, and the first one of the two shows we're doing this year is called The Poly Couple.
Right.
And The Poly Couple was really interesting in that, I'm always told, you got to check out this new format. It's going to be the future of everything. And I always enjoy the forums, but I never see how it applies to what I do. You know what I mean? And so people have been pushing me to TikTok for a long time, and I was getting on it, and I enjoyed TikTok, but I didn't see it as anything that related to my world. When all of a sudden these short pieces came on called The Poly Couple, and they were really well written. They were really funny. They were beautifully acted. And I became obsessed with this show. I thought, this is actually really well done. And so I reached out to Daniel of the Poly Couple and I said, would you be interested in turning these into half-hour shows for Electric Now? And that began this adventure. And it's been so interesting and so much fun. And I think he's even been surprised to see how what they envisioned as these short little 2-minute things actually worked so perfectly as a 30-minute show.
What were you thinking Gen Z in mind when you reached out? Was this an audience that you're trying to, or is this just something that you want to try adapting something new based on social video and this is what you liked?
You know what? One of the things that have separated our company from the rest of Hollywood is we never try to figure anything out. We don't look at market research. We don't try to say, oh, well, the kids will like this or older people will like this. Or we just follow things that we think are really interesting and fun and that we like. And I've kind of made a career on uh, uh, creating shows that take you to a world you've never seen before. Whether it's another planet or showing the Philippines in a way that had never been done on television before. And watching this, I thought for the average person, I think a polyamorous relationship is as different as going to the moon. It's a whole other world. And Dana and Daniel have done such an interesting job of really portraying the complexities of this and with enormous humor. It's a fun show to watch. It's mostly comic, but there are moments that are very touching. And it's not like at all what I was expecting. It's not exploitive. It's not, oh, look at all the sex happening. It's really relationships are difficult
Right.
and they're exponentially more difficult when you're in a polyamorous relationship.
I would spoil it just for the audience. Poly Couple focuses on Dana and Daniel, a couple that lives together. They're young, as you've already been inferred, and they're exploring kind of casual relationships, both of them with other people, and the the kind of comedy pathos revolves around the interactions with sometimes awkward and sometimes I don't want to say soft core, but very provocative in that way, kind of skirt the line a little bit. I'd heard that the Gen Z was a little repressed and hung up. Not in this case. It's really open. It's really out there. Any concerns about the family friendly aspect of it?
Well, For me, the show is family friendly because it's really, and there's nothing in the show that couldn't be on broadcast television. It's just exploring a world that's not known to most people. I'm older, so I have a different frame of reference. So to me, what the show kind of reminded me of is when I was a kid, there used to be a show called Love American Style. I
Sure.
don't know if you, and
Do.
it, yeah, and it was always exploring, the complexities of relationships at that time.
Well,
And for me, this is really exploring what is that world like, and it's a very different world.
I'd forgotten about that show. It was a little bit early, but this is, of its time and its place. So I get it. Let's back up a little bit and talk about the business and how you were one of the first to be aggressive in terms of creating original cable programming. And this is you're going back 15, 20 years, and you still do that. But maybe for those who aren't familiar of your background, you were there first, you saw the industry ebb or peak and then ebb a little bit. It's still something you're involved with, but you were among the first in free ad supported streaming as well. Walk us through a brief history of time in terms of your television production business.
Well, it's interesting because, as so many careers started off, in television and moved into giant feature films. I kind of did my career backwards. I started with gigantic action, adventure, science fiction feature films like Independence Day and Godzilla.
And Geostorm.
Well, that's later. But in the beginning, those films, and then I think it was around 2017. No, no, sorry. It was 2004. It was 2004, and I got a call from Michael Wright, who was running TNT at the
Sure.
time, and he said, "Dean, I'd very much like to do one of your movies on TNT." And I said, "That's awesome, but my movies cost a crazy amount of money. I don't know how that economics would work of doing one of my kind of movies on TNT." And he said, "Well, obviously, we don't have the kind of money, $100 million to make these giant movies." He goes, "But we do spend more than anyone else." He said, "We can go up to 12 million." And he said, "But the interesting part is that you could own it." And
Right.
then my antenna went up. What do you mean I could own it?" And he said, "We'll pay a license fee to put the show on the air for 4 years. You'll pay the deficit of the part that we don't cover, and then you own it forever, and you could sell it around the world and resell it to us or resell it to other people." And that kind of just changed the whole model of how it was working. And so we did these 3 movies for TNT. They were all giant smash hits. In fact, I would say I defy anyone to find any other movies of the week from 2004 that are still selling today, because all 3 of those movies sell today. And
Right.
that led us to doing the TNT series Leverage. Then that led into us doing the Librarians, taking those movies and doing them as a series for TNT. And it really kind of started our whole adventure of doing television.
What's interesting is at that point you don't know the industry is going to go through the garden hose it is. Well, maybe you do, and you have to do things a lot more efficiently than you did before. And is that the start of that capability?
Well, I think the exaggeration of that, but I mean, part of why Roland Emmerich and I were able to do the movies we did is because we were always known as guys who will give you a bigger movie for less money. I think the first movie Roland and I did together was Universal Soldier, and it had a budget of $10 million, and everyone thought we'd spent 50. Then we did Stargate at 55, and everyone thought we'd spent 100. And then we did Independence Day at 74, and people thought it was 150. So
That was 74. Wow. Yeah.
that was always kind of our niche, is that we knew how to get more out of less.
Right.
But when I suddenly had to take $100 million movie and do it for 12 million on TNT, it really, I had to stretch those skills beyond what I'd been used to.
And there's also kind of an awareness of where the audience was going. What I liked about the TNT shows is if you had a long day, I mean, it's not an intellectual thing. It's a matter of attention, and you don't get shoved off the freeway easily. You can stay with it, and it's really accessible in that way. The narrative flow. Netflix
When I
does it. Yeah.
I was 18 years old and everyone else was going to college, I was working a loading dock in New York,
Right.
and it was hard work. We were putting boxes on trucks and trying to get the trucks out in time. And I remember I would come home so exhausted, and I would turn on the TV, and all I wanted was to escape all the crap I had gone through that day.
Right.
I didn't want to be given a lesson. I didn't want to be preached at. I didn't want an education. I wanted an escape. And that's really when I realized the value of escapist entertainment. You know, escapist entertainment is always looked down on as a lesser art form, but I find it to be something incredibly necessary. And it was interesting to watch it having this resurgence since the pandemic, because you go through a pandemic, you go through hard economic times, political divisions, and suddenly you realize, you know, escapist entertainment is a really important part of the diet. It
Right.
can never be the entire diet, but sometimes you just really need to just not think about all the crap you got to deal with every single day of your life.
Leverage is an example of that. You do it, it has a good life, it lives its natural cycle, and then it goes away. It was on TNT for how many seasons?
So we did 5 seasons on TNT originally,
Right.
and then we came back and did 3 more seasons on Amazon and Amazon Prime.
Right. What was that discussion? How did that happen?
Well, I'm kind of dogged on all of my children. I never am ready to put my children to bed. Ever since both Leverage and Librarians had been canceled, I was always trying to find a way to bring it back. And I had heard that Amazon was going to start a AVOD division.
Right.
At that time, it was called IMDb TV. And the whole thing was to do reruns.
Right.
And I came to them, I said, well, what if I could get you a show basically at the price you're paying for reruns and it's original? Would you be interested? And they said, absolutely. So I pitched a version of Leverage that I could do at that price. And they said, well, let us look at it, at Leverage, we'll come back to you. So they did, and they asked me back, and they said, why do you think that Leverage was such a success? And I said, well, you have to remember what was going on in the country at that time. And at the time that Leverage first came out, there was a real feeling in our country that the rich and powerful are unstoppable and that we don't have any power against the rich and powerful. And so our show was the ultimate fantasy fulfillment. It was, what if there was a Robin Hood team that could give you some leverage and
Right.
level the playing field? And it blew up. And Amazon said, our research says that's exactly why it was a hit. And they said, so we feel like that's going on right now again here. What would it take to do the bigger version of the show? I said,
Right.
well, it's a bigger price tag. They go, yeah, but what would it be? And I told them, and they didn't blink, and we got to really do the Cadillac version of the show.
Well, it seems like the Rolls Royce version would be necessary now. I mean, the billionaires robbing us blind. So let's talk about this library that you amass over time that you can
Sure.
control the rights to. I guess at the end of the last decade, streaming starts to become a thing. Everybody's talking about AVOD and fast for the first time. And you look at your library and say, wow, got enough for a platform. Is that chicken of thought, or how did your fast get launched?
So we did not start Electric Now for any kind of economic reasons. It's just that we had discovered that the Leverage fan base was an incredibly energized fan base. They were very active. They were playing role playing games. They were buying novelizations about the show. They were writing an enormous amount of fan fiction. And we then discovered that we had
Fan
a,
fiction?
a
Anything to be good
ton.
or,
Well, I can't read it because that would put me in some legal problems. But everyone tells me that the fan fiction is insane.
yeah,
Then we found I had a similar audience with the Librarian and a similar audience with the Outpost. So our thought was, let's start a platform where we can aggregate our fans. Because if they like one show, maybe they'll like the other one. Maybe we can create a community. Because Hollywood is very bad at creating a one-on-one relationship with the customer. We're the only business that has never really nurtured that. So we thought this
right.
would be an opportunity for us, and we got to test that because when we had this show called Almost Paradise, and it was on the WGN,
That was
but by
filmed
the
in
time
the Philippines, right?
it was filmed in the Philippines, exactly. But while we were shooting it, they had decided to kill WGN and turn it into News Nation. So there was going to be this tiny window of time before News Nation started, and while the other one was dying, and our show was going to debut. So
Right.
it meant we weren't going to get any publicity. They didn't even want to put out a press release. There's going to be no press conference. There's going to be no tours. Literally, it was just going to be dumped on as filler until the channel started. So the only way we were able to talk to the world was to those fans on our app. And so we promoted the show to them. We said, look, if you liked these shows, you might like that show. And while this doesn't sound like an extraordinary number, we were getting over 500,000 people a night watching the show on a show that had zero publicity, zero support, zero. And that was the first time we started to see the power
Right.
of having communication with our fan base.
Well, I think audience scale now, as opposed to what it was 20 years ago. I mean, you say 500,000 viewers now, and it's impressive. It's we're dealing with a different way of
We're a lot more segmented. Yes, that's true. But but we had the experiment again though with the Ark when that came out, where we did something very similar.
yeah.
And between Peacock and Sci-Fi, they were seeing 6.5 million viewers a week. So, I just think there are new ways to communicate with audiences. There's new ways to engage them. And so for us, yes, the streaming platform is turning into something that generates revenue for us, and we're very pleased about that. But it was never the intention. The intention always was, can we make something that's engaging for our fans, that's unique for them? Like we do after shows of every show we do, and we put it on our app and our channel. And I'm so surprised at the ratings we get on these shows because it's so inside baseball. But that's what hardcore fans want. They want to know something that the other fans don't know so that they can be the smartest guy in the room when they're talking about the show.
How long have you been doing that?
We've done it since the first season of Leverage Redemption.
So you're out for that. I know Apple did it for it's blanking on the name because I watch it all the time. Starts with a P. Vince Gilligan's show.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's Pluribus.
Pluribus. Yes, thank you. It's strange because I watch it all the time. So the economics change again for free streaming. I'm guessing you have to figure that out. What kind of efficiencies make it possible to do original series in that medium? What has changed?
Well, it always depends on the show, and can I shoot it, in a country that has a bigger tax rebate and has lower costs, and there's this big movement now to try to get a federal rebate in the United States, and it would be gigantic if they could pull that off. It would be a big game changer. But
Right.
the way a company like ours works, we get a license fee from a network or a streaming platform, and it's never the full cost of the show. So then we have to put up the money for the rest of it.
Right.
So these budgets just keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. The version of the Librarians that I do now, I mean, if you watch it, it looks twice as big as the original. It looks like, wow, they really improved the production value. But we're doing it for less than 1/3 of the budget of the original, and that was 10 years ago.
Right.
So it forces companies, especially independent companies like ours, to chase any kind of rebates or tax incentives and lower pricings. Um, and that's really the only way you can do it right now. But if we were to pass that federal rebate and could marry it to state rebates, that could really bring an enormous amount of production back to the United States.
Right now seems like a really difficult time to predict what direction that kind of policy goes.
Predicting anything in our country right now is really hard.
So, in terms of the economics of a poly couple, obviously you can't give away too sensitive information, but how does that work in broad strokes? What are the basics we can talk about? Or
Well, I could just say this, that this is an experiment. We don't know if this will impact viewership on our app.
right,
So obviously we had to do this thing on an absolute shoestring. But the hope is if we see that it's creating movement, if we're able to sell the show foreign, then if we get another season, we can really improve the budget and and do more. But right now, this is really an experiment. We don't know if this will affect us positively. And even if it does affect us positively, is it 2%? Is it 5%? Is it 10%?
right.
We'll have to see.
Speaking of experiments, you've never shied away from them, and it goes back to our volatile policy discussion. AI seems to be something that is in a very volatile state in terms of what's accepted and what's not in the town. What's your viewpoint on it? How do you see using it in the future for yourself?
Listen, my opinion about how it should be used and will be used, at least in our world, is it's a tool.
Right,
And a tool in the hands of an artist, it could be really something special. I think that there's a bit of lazy thinking out there where you say, well, why do you even need the artist? It'll just do it. And just look, historically, that's never worked. When they thought, oh, well, we now don't need musicians anymore because we can recreate everything digitally.
right,
What really happened is the digital instruments became a tool for musicians, and that augmented what they were doing, and it made things cheaper and bigger and better, but it didn't replace them.
right,
Um, Someone said this to me recently. They said, that these, if you take the world's greatest chess computer and you have it play against the world's greatest human player, sometimes the human wins, sometimes the computer wins, but the games are always fascinating.
right,
But if you take the world's greatest chess computer and have it play the world's greatest chess, computer. Every game is a draw, and they're the most boring games in the history of games. The human soul cannot be recreated. It can be imitated, it can
Right.
be mimicked, but it can't be created. So I think that AI in the hands of really interesting artists, it'll make efficiencies, it'll streamline how long it takes to get things done, and really interesting things will come of it. But if the powers that be begin to think, well, we don't need it anymore, we'll just use this, then I think we're going to have some very hollowed. The uncanny valley will reach a new.
We can't obviously go into, and this is a pretty deep subject, and we can't go too far into it, but you're obviously somebody who believes in potential. You're somebody who has proven that in the new world, you can make the economics work. So some of the here and now potential of the technology must be very enticing. And I'm guessing, if I may call it so, the sort of Luddite pushback on the other side is real and has implications for the business too. How do you walk that tightrope, I guess, right now?
Well, look, I think the problem is it's not going away.
Right.
I mean, it's just not going to go away. The milk has been spilled. So the question is, how do we coexist? How do we get the best out of it? And how do we prevent it from destroying our entire industry? Personally, I like using it as a communication tool. It's been great for me to help me communicate with other artists on things I want to get done. But then I still need the other artists. I don't want to replace the other artists. I don't want to have less artists involved. But if it can help me get to the finish line faster, I'm all for it. I mean, look, for me, this is like when we stopped editing on film and we moved to digital editing. The whole town thought that this was like the end of creativity. Um, and it was just a better tool and a tool we ended up using. I think as long as this can be a tool, it's going to be fantastic. If it starts to become something else, it'll end our industry.
Right. Moving on to formats, you branched out to social for your latest project. Watching the Poly Couple, I thought, well, that it could make a great vertical as well. Some of the subject matter, a lot of those delve into romantic drama territory. Any thought into getting to that market? Have you delved in that market? What's your viewpoint of that?
Well, in essence, the original was vertical. I mean, it was on TikTok.
Right.
So I think it has and it continues to have a vertical life. I'm not participating in that. That's not my area. I thought what was interesting for me is, can I reshape this into traditional storytelling? For me, that has more value in that I can resell that. I can sell it in other countries. It can have a real life from that. The problem I think with the verticals are uh, I don't know what the resale value is on a vertical. I don't know where else you're selling it. I don't know what that library value is. Now, maybe the whole world will change and we'll all watch things only vertically, and then those libraries might have value down the line. But right now, it seems that they're profitable for the platform. They don't seem to be that profitable for the people making them. I don't know. That world would have to mature a lot more before it would be worth our time and energy, because we spill a lot of blood on every show we make. So I need to make sure that the economics of it makes sense for the amount of time that we spend on something.
Before I wind down, how many people do you have under you in the Electric Empire?
Well, it ebbs and flows. I mean, as far as permanent, there's probably only 30 employees permanently, but depending on what time of year it is, how many series we're going, we'll get as big as 3,000 people. It just really depends on the time of the year and how many things we've got going at the same time.
Right. So, to wind down, they provided me 2 episodes. Thank you for that, of the Poly Couple. The first season is 10 episodes. What is the
Nine
9
episodes.
episodes? And what is the official premiere date?
I believe it is April 16th.
On Electric Now exclusively, or is there other places to watch it?
It'll be Electric Now exclusively at first, and then a few weeks after that, it'll start to be available other places.
So, I got a kick out of it. It's a half-hour romantic comedy drama.
Yeah,
Check it out on electricnow.com, free to view. And once again, thank you, Dean, for on short notice joining us on the podcast and kind of flying through stuff. It was a pleasure to have you.
I appreciate you inviting me onto the show. It's always fun to talk to you.
Great. I'm Daniel Frankel, co-founder of Next TMT. Thank you for joining us.